So it'll be interesting to hear. We've got a popular question about when do these projects start? When should researchers be thinking about them? Is it sort of, do you figure out as you go along? Should you be thinking about it before you even start your project? So yeah, does someone want to jump in to answer that? So.
I think it was probably implicit when I introduced myself, but I think you can't emphasize too highly for me that planning for public engagement and for impact should be embedded right throughout the process. And you can't start thinking about it soon enough. Start thinking about it right at the beginning. Engagement isn't that frilly bit at the end. It's not the dissemination of the knowledge after the process is done. It's about working with stakeholders, working with different communities right the way through your project. And as I said earlier, it's about planning, it's about questions, it's about knowledge production. To leave it to the end, to leave it to something that you think about afterwards, inevitably reduces the value of the engagement and reduces the value of the impact that your engagement might have. So I think you can't start soon enough.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd add to that yeah, it's important to think about it from the start and to think about impact as being something that's quite a reciprocal process, but also having some questions that you might want to ask of yourself at the start of a public engagement project. So who is this public that we're addressing? What's your public? Why are they going to be interested in what you have to say? So not just what are you going to get out of it, what are they going to get out of it? And I think asking those questions quite early on is really important in sort of pushing, having quite concrete aims and objectives that you want to head for, and in shaping the project in that way as well.
Stacey, does this match with your understanding of looking at sort of the sheer amounts of data that you look at? Is that reflective there?
I absolutely agree with everything that Anne and Charlotte said. I think that when you're thinking about impact specifically, every project has the potential for impact. I'm thinking about an example that I actually just learned about yesterday. This team of scientists won a prize because they spend their time massaging rats. And this was the result of a kind of unrelated study that they were doing to understand the research. They were doing research on growth markers in animals. And so as kind of a side effect of this, some of the rats had not so great outcomes because they were being taken away from their mothers at a very early age. And so the team of researchers would massage these rats in order to kind of simulate the touch that the mother would have on the rats. And the rats ended up having much better outcomes. What does this have to do with, like, humans, you might ask? Well, actually that research has formed the basis of interventions that folks are doing now with premature babies, the understanding of the importance of touch and the fact that premature babies especially are in need of it when they're born and in the hospital and being cared for. And so even the silliest, what seems like pretty silly, basic research like massaging rats or shrimps on treadmills, which was an example from here in the US that Congress latched on to not too long ago. They really have the potential for long-term impacts in terms of effects on society, effects on public health, many other different types of effects. And so kind of thinking about not only these questions that you ask at the beginning about who are the audiences that we're trying to engage, and what sort of impacts might my research have, but then also how can you measure the effects of the dissemination of your research, and if your communications plan is going off according to plan. And I think altmetrics, which are, for those who don't know, altmetrics are metrics that you can gather from both the social web, so looking at things like Twitter and Facebook, but then also from anything else that can be measured online. So are citations to your work appearing in policy documents or patents and so on. And by having that kind of feedback loop that is instantaneous to appear pretty much because of the nature of the web, it makes it a lot easier to understand if the public engagement plan, if the communications plan that you had set out is working as it's in progress, as it's in process. So I definitely suggest that that also be part of any sort of impact or public engagement plan, because metrics themselves, while not evidence when standing alone, they can be really, really valuable as kind of signals that impacts might lie elsewhere. So if you know that you've been tweeted by 300 people, one of those might be a Nobel laureate who you have an opportunity to make a connection with if you're following the conversation that's happening around your research online. And similarly, you can look at things like policy documents and patents, which I mentioned before, to understand the actual impacts that your work is having in the real world, and not just are people talking about it online.
Great. Well, yeah, I think that launches. Oh, sorry, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I don't disagree with anything that anyone said about planning and getting public engagement, impact planning, early in the process. But I, also emphasised that people need to be alive to the serendipitous opportunities. So just because you haven't planned, you didn't think your research was going to be of interest to a particular group or a particular audience, and then later on you realize it is, well, seize that opportunity and go for it, because that's often where really exciting things can happen.
Yeah, and I think going on that serendipity, I think that's one thing that sort of new digital experiments and digital sort of platforms really bolster.